The galaxy was at war, and every species knew it. For centuries, the humans had been a mystery, isolated, quiet, and relatively unknown to the vast civilizations of the galaxy. But now, they had emerged, and the consequences were undeniable. The great empires, once thought invincible, had fallen one by one. The Cathar, once masters of the stars, lost their throne to humanity's relentless expansion. The Devar Alliance, known for their technological superiority, were shattered by human ingenuity. Every planet they conquered, every fleet they destroyed, sent ripples through the galaxy, and the fear spread like wildfire. Now in the heart of the galactic core, the remaining leaders of the galaxy's most powerful species were meeting. This wasn't a peaceful summit. It was a desperate gathering. Representatives from over 100 civilizations, some ancient and wise, others young and growing, had come together to form the last alliance. Their goal was clear: stop humanity before it was too late. The room, an enormous circular chamber located within the heart of the star system, was filled with tension. Each species sat at the table, their eyes dark with the weight of the universe's future. The humans had not just been powerful, they had been different. Resourceful, resilient, and relentless. They didn't fear death, they welcomed it. And they had the technology to back up their promises. For many, it was hard to imagine that any species could defeat them. But this council would be their last hope. At the center of the room, an enormous holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive glimmering structure, a creation of the last remaining minds of the galaxy, the Voidborn Shield. It was an engineering marvel, powered by the energy of 3 suns, capable of creating an impenetrable barrier that could destroy any incoming fleet. It was the galaxy's most advanced weapon, capable of shielding entire star systems from even the most advanced weaponry. The leaders of the Alliance believed it to be the answer to humanity's power. The hope of the galaxy rested on this one structure, located at the edge of the galaxy, far from Earth's reach. If they could hold humanity off long enough to bring it online, perhaps they could force the humans to retreat. Admiral Lorith, the leader of the Exolothian race, a towering figure with glowing blue skin and eyes that seemed to pierce through the very soul, stood at the head of the council. He looked around the room at the weary faces of his allies. "This is it," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Humanity's unrelenting strikes have shattered our worlds, and if we don't act now, they will claim our very future. We must make our stand, and we will use the Voidborn Shield to stop them." The room was silent. Every species in that room had once been a power in the galaxy. The mighty Enverar, the telepathic Tiari, and even the peaceful Galothian, whose biotechnological advancements were unrivaled, all now looked to humanity with fear. A representative from the Tiari, a thin, silver-skinned being with 4 eyes, spoke up. "But the humans, they don't fight like we do. They don't rely on the same strategies. We believe we can stop them, but can we truly comprehend their methods?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The humans didn't fight by the rules of the galaxy's previous wars. Their tactics were unpredictable. Where others saw chaos, the humans saw opportunity. They adapted, learned, and struck when least expected. Another voice, this one a quiet, almost musical tone, came from the Galothian representative, a species known for their ability to manipulate living organisms. "We cannot forget what we've learned about their strategies. They have advanced technology, yes, but their greatest weapon is their will. When the human warships came to our borders, they did not seek to conquer. They sought to break us. Our morale was shattered before our defenses even fell. That is the true weapon they wield." The room fell into a heavy silence. Everyone knew this truth. Humanity didn't just want to win, they wanted to destroy hope itself. And once that was taken, no defense would matter. Admiral Lorith nodded solemnly. "We all know what they are capable of. But we have no choice. The Voidborn Shield is our final hope. If we can't stop them here, then the galaxy will fall under their rule." For days, they worked tirelessly, pooling every resource, every bit of knowledge they had to prepare the shield. The massive station was located at the farthest reaches of the galaxy, an artificial star surrounded by millions of drones and automated defenses. The shield itself was still in the final stages of activation. They just needed time, and the humans were on their way. As the council concluded, each representative stood, exchanging solemn nods with their allies. There was no more talk of peace. No more attempts to understand one another. It was a fight for survival. It would either be the end of humanity or the end of everything else. Out in the deep reaches of space, the human fleet was already on the move. Their warships, dark and imposing, cut through the stars like a shadow moving swiftly across a bright sky. Each ship, perfectly designed for speed and firepower, carried a crew hardened by countless battles. They were coming, and they were ready to fight, to break the last remaining hope of the galaxy, just as they had done before. But this time, something was different. Something darker. Something no one had expected. Back at the Voidborn Shield, the first flashes of the human fleet's arrival were seen. Waves of dark ships appeared on the scanners, like a storm coming to break everything in its path. The final battle for the galaxy's fate was about to begin. It was no longer a question of who would win. It was a question of how long the Alliance could hold before their hope shattered under humanity's relentless strike. The vast expanse of space was calm, deceptively so. For a while, it was as if the galaxy had collectively held its breath, waiting for the inevitable storm. Humanity had been quiet for a time, seemingly distant and unreachable. But in truth, they had been preparing, ever ready for what was to come. Now, the peaceful silence was about to be shattered. The leaders of the Galactic Alliance, still basking in the fleeting hope that their weapon, the Voidborn Shield, would be enough, could not have known just how ready humanity truly was. The people of Earth had always been underestimated. Their capacity for survival, their tenacity, and their willingness to do whatever it took to win had made them a force unlike any other in the galaxy. And this time, there would be no negotiation, no compromise. There would be only one answer: total war. As the fleets of the Alliance waited on the edge of the galaxy, humanity's response came in a way no one could have predicted. The unified human armada, led by the formidable Admiral Riker, had already begun its journey. It was not the first time humanity had faced overwhelming odds. It was not the first time they had been underestimated. And once again, they would prove the galaxy wrong. The human fleet emerged from the darkness, not in a massive, overwhelming wave, but with precision and purpose. A fleet of black ships, sleek and ominous, cutting through the stars as though they had always belonged there. Their arrival was a shock, not just in the scale of the force, but in the method. They had sent a message, a warning that shook the galaxy to its core. It had come through every channel, across every communication system, echoing across the void with chilling clarity. We have asked for peace. You refused. Now you will stand aside or fall. The choice is yours. Admiral Riker's voice was cold, devoid of emotion, but the weight of his words was enough to send a shiver through even the bravest leaders in the Alliance. There was no bluster, no grand speeches. Only the cold, unwavering truth. The message was simple. Humanity had come, and they would not be stopped. In the council chambers of the Alliance, the leaders sat in stunned silence, processing the message. The sheer arrogance of it. The certainty. It was as if humanity had already won the war before it had even begun. There were no signs of fear, only determination. Some of the representatives tried to speak, to rally their forces, but it was clear that the mood had shifted. The Alliance was no longer certain of its victory. The weapon they had placed so much faith in, the Voidborn Shield, now seemed uncertain. Was it truly enough to stop humanity? Would it even hold against the relentless might of the human war machine? At the front of the human fleet, Admiral Riker stood aboard the flagship, his eyes fixed on the massive holographic display before him. The fleet was smaller than some of the Alliance's vast armadas, but Riker knew that size wasn't what mattered. It was precision. Humanity's strength lay in its adaptability, its ability to learn from every battle, every mistake. That was what had brought them this far. But what they had now, what they had developed in secret, was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Project Black Sun was humanity's final weapon. Riker's fingers hovered over the controls as the human fleet aligned itself with precision. Project Black Sun was activated. A sudden surge of energy rippled through the flagship and across the entire fleet, a pulse that was invisible to the naked eye but powerful enough to bend space itself. As the signal reached the first of the human warships, something remarkable happened. The ships that had once seemed entire star systems came online. The human fleet was no longer just a threat of firepower. It had become a force of nature, an unknown quantity in the galaxy's calculus. The first attack came just as the Alliance had prepared for the Voidborn shield to engage. Expecting the human fleet to charge straight for the shield, they were instead met with a barrage of energy that defied all understanding. It wasn't like any weapon they had ever seen. The blasts didn't just strike their shields or hulls, they phased through them. Ships exploded in silence, their wreckage flickering in and out of reality, as if the very fabric of space couldn't hold them together. The Alliance's greatest minds scrambled to make sense of the attack, but it was too late. They had never faced anything like it before. They were being torn apart by an enemy who didn't even seem to be fighting by the rules. On the human flagship, Admiral Riker stood calmly, watching the unfolding chaos through a large observation window. His crew, though well-trained, understood the significance of the moment. This was not a typical battle. This was a statement. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come to end the war. The human fleet moved with terrifying efficiency, their ships phasing in and out of the shield's field, picking off Alliance vessels one by one. No matter how the Alliance tried to adapt, no matter how they restructured their defense systems, they could not keep up. The weapons they relied on simply could not comprehend what was happening. What the humans had unleashed was a force that was beyond their understanding, a weapon that bent the laws of physics in ways no one thought possible. As the battle raged on, the leaders of the Alliance watched helplessly as their greatest weapon, the Voidborn shield, began to fail. It flickered, its energy spikes growing weaker with every passing moment. The shield, once thought to be the ultimate defense, was not strong enough to withstand the sheer force of humanity's relentless assault. The energy from Project Black Sun was overwhelming, corrupting the shield from within, turning their last hope into their greatest downfall. It wasn't just a battle of ships. It was a battle of will. And humanity's will was unyielding. In the heart of the Alliance's command center, the tension was palpable. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and it seemed like the galaxy's final hope was slipping away. The representatives, who had once been so certain of victory, now found themselves grasping for any solution, any way to turn the tide. But no matter what they did, humanity's answer was clear. They were not here to fight, they were here to win. The galaxy's greatest weapon, its final defense, was falling apart, and all the Alliance could do was watch as humanity's might tore through it like a knife through paper. As the last remnants of the Alliance fleet began to scatter in a desperate retreat, Admiral Riker's voice crackled through the communications channels once more. This is the end. Not just of your war, but of everything you thought you knew about strength. Humanity has answered, and we are only just beginning. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before. The human fleet had struck quickly and decisively, and now the next phase of their campaign had begun. It was not a battle they were entering. It was a siege, a relentless, unyielding force that would grind down every last shred of resistance until there was nothing left but rubble. Humanity had shown the galaxy its might, but now it was time to show them its patience. The stakes were higher than ever. The Alliance had no idea what was coming, but they soon would. Admiral Riker stood in the heart of his flagship, the heart of the entire human war effort. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the holographic maps and the constant hum of the ship's systems. It was strangely calm in this command center, as if time itself had slowed down. Outside the ship, the galaxy stretched on forever, and Riker could feel the weight of the mission settling on his shoulders. The siege had started. Humanity had come for one thing, and that was the galaxy's submission. It was not a matter of winning anymore. It was a matter of making everyone understand the cost of defiance. The first target was the capital of the Alliance, a sprawling, towering city that stretched across the surface of an entire planet. It was a hub of power and decision-making, a place where the fate of thousands of star systems had been determined. Now, it was about to become humanity's first statement. The human fleet surrounded the planet, blocking any attempt at escape or communication. The Alliance was cornered, and it didn't even know it yet. The flagship's communication channels crackled to life, but the only message that came through was cold and clear. This is Admiral Riker of the United Human Armada. Surrender now, or face the consequences. The message echoed across every channel, but no reply came. No response. The silence that followed spoke volumes. They knew humanity had already won. The siege was not just about force, it was about breaking the will of those who thought they could stand against it. Inside the capital, the leaders of the Alliance scrambled. They had believed that the human threat was nothing more than a passing phase, a mere nuisance. They had ignored humanity for so long, assuming their strength would never compare to the grand military forces of the Alliance. But as Riker's ships hovered above their planet, they knew this was something different. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Their defense systems, once considered invulnerable, were useless against the human technology. The Voidborn shield had failed them. The very weapon they had relied on to protect their capital had been neutralized in the blink of an eye. The truth hit them all at once. The Alliance had no chance. The siege began in earnest. Human warships moved into position, their weapons charged and ready. Massive energy beams shot down from the fleet, slicing through the atmosphere with terrifying precision. They didn't fire at random. Each shot was carefully calculated, each one aimed at crippling the capital's ability to fight back. Power plants were obliterated, leaving the entire city in darkness. Communications were severed, cutting the planet off from the rest of the galaxy. The people of the capital didn't know it yet, but they were already trapped. The city was slowly being strangled, its infrastructure systematically destroyed, its lifeblood drained away. On the ground, chaos erupted as people scrambled to find shelter from the sudden assault. The air was thick with dust, and the sky flickered with the light of distant explosions. Yet, through it all, there was a cold sense of inevitability. Humanity was not here to wipe them out quickly. They were here to take their time, to break them piece by piece. And as the human forces moved in, it became clear that resistance was futile. The city's defensive units attempted to mount a counterattack, but their weapons bounced off the human warship's shields as if they were nothing more than toys. The human fleet didn't even need to engage them directly. They were in control of the space around the planet, and that was all they needed. As the siege wore on, Riker remained unmoved. He knew exactly what he was doing. This was no ordinary battle. This was psychological warfare. The longer the siege lasted, the more the people of the capital would begin to question everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The human fleet was everywhere, unrelenting and inescapable. The citizens, once so confident in their planet's defenses, now found themselves trapped within their own walls, powerless and fearful. Every passing moment chipped away at their morale. Every explosion, every blast of energy tearing through their defenses, reminded them of how helpless they were. They were at humanity's mercy. In the command center of the Alliance, the leaders convened in a frantic meeting. They had once believed themselves to be the superior power in the galaxy. They had stood above everyone else, secure in their technological advancements and their military might. But now, they were staring into the abyss. The human fleet was not just a threat, it was a force that could and would obliterate everything they had built. They had no plan. They had no backup. They had no way to stop what was coming. And with every passing minute, the pressure mounted. Admiral Riker's voice echoed through the comm channels once more, each word deliberate, calculated. You have two choices: surrender, or your world becomes nothing more than a memory. His voice was calm, almost reassuring. But the weight of his words, the reality behind them, sent waves of panic through the Alliance's leaders. There was no anger in Riker's voice. There didn't need to be. The very nature of the siege was its power. The silence that followed his message was more deafening than any explosion. Humanity wasn't just fighting a war, they were dismantling the very foundation of the Alliance's power piece by piece. Outside, the warships continued their assault. The human fleet didn't need to rush. They were in control, and they knew it. The people of the capital had nowhere to go. They could no longer escape. They could no longer fight back. All they could do was wait. And as the hours stretched into days, the realization began to set in. Humanity was not just here to... was over. The fall had come. The human fleet was no longer a mere presence in the sky. It was the inevitable end of the old order. On the surface of the planet, General Teresh of the Alliance stood before his soldiers. His face was stern, his eyes burning with determination, but even he could not escape the cold reality that surrounded them. They were surrounded. The human fleet hovered above, the massive ships casting shadows over the land, blocking out the sun. For the first time, the Alliance's military might seem like nothing more than a distant memory, a relic of the past. The capital city, which had once been the center of power in the galaxy, was now nothing but a target. The city's massive walls, once thought impregnable, now seemed like a futile gesture. Humanity was coming, and nothing could stop them. Teresh knew it would be a fight for survival, but even he couldn't deny the overwhelming odds. His forces had held the line for months, but every day brought more destruction, more despair. The human warships in orbit were unlike anything the Alliance had ever faced before. Their weapons tore through the atmosphere with ease, striking critical infrastructure from miles away. Power plants, defense stations, communication hubs all were destroyed with brutal efficiency. The human fleet's advanced technology seemed endless, its firepower unmatchable. Teresh had seen the reports. He knew that resistance was slipping away. But still, he refused to give in. He couldn't. His soldiers depended on him. Admiral Riker watched from the bridge of his flagship, his face impassive as the battle unfolded below. The sight of the Alliance forces scrambling to maintain order was almost sad, but Riker didn't feel pity. The time for mercy had passed. He had been tasked with delivering a final blow to the Alliance, and he would do so without hesitation. His fleet had already launched precision strikes on key targets across the surface, and now they would move in to finish the job. The human strategy had always been clear: conquer with overwhelming force, and crush any hope of survival. But what Riker understood more than anyone else was that breaking the enemy's morale was just as important as breaking their defenses. It was not enough to destroy them physically. They had to know they were beaten. The city below, once a shining symbol of the Alliance's dominance, was now in chaos. The streets were filled with smoke, the air thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning buildings. People ran, their faces filled with fear as the sound of explosions echoed through the city. The Alliance's defenses, once thought invincible, were now crumbling under the weight of the human assault. Riker's warships circled above, relentless and unyielding. There was no escape. There was no help. For the first time, the Alliance realized just how powerless they truly were. Teresh's last-ditch efforts to rally his forces were futile. The enemy was everywhere, and no matter where they turned, the humans were right there, waiting to finish what they had started. Inside the command center of the capital, Teresh and his officers scrambled to make a plan. But there was nothing left to plan. The power grid had failed, and their communications were cut off. The siege had gone on for far too long. The human ships had begun firing on the city itself, targeting civilian structures to send a message. It was a deliberate act. They were not simply destroying the city, they were dismantling everything that had made the Alliance strong. They were taking away the very foundation of the government, piece by piece. Teresh could see it now. The Alliance's days were numbered. Their so-called final hope was nothing but an illusion, and soon it would shatter under the weight of humanity's determination. The first wave of destruction was brutal. Riker's fleet unleashed a salvo of missiles that rained down on the city, leveling entire neighborhoods in mere seconds. The sound was deafening, the ground shaking as buildings crumbled to the ground. The shock wave of each blast sent tremors through the city, throwing people to the ground. In the chaos, Teresh could see his soldiers trying to mount a defense, but it was too little, too late. The human forces were too well coordinated, too precise. There was no way to fight back. The city's defense systems had already been breached, and the remaining Alliance soldiers could do nothing but fight for their lives. Riker's fleet continued to press forward, tightening the noose around the city. The human warships hovered over the remnants of the once proud capital, firing with devastating accuracy. The streets below were a war zone, filled with fire, rubble, and desperation. And in the midst of it all, the message was clear. Resistance was futile. The last hope of the Alliance was fading. The human forces had proven that they could break any defense, dismantle any resistance. The era of the Alliance had ended. As the final assault began. There was no escape. There was no chance to win. All that was left was to fight until the very end. The final hope of the Alliance had crumbled, and there was no one left to save them. Riker's voice came through the comm system once more, cold and unfeeling. "This is Admiral Riker. Your time is up. Surrender or face total annihilation." The message was a formality now. The Alliance had already lost. It was only a matter of time before the final blow fell. On the ground, the last pockets of resistance fought fiercely, but it was clear that their fate was sealed. The human forces swept through the city, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Taresh watched helplessly as his comrades fell, one by one. The streets ran red with the blood of those who had fought so hard to defend their way of life. But even they knew it was over. The galaxy's final hope had fallen, and humanity had emerged victorious. Admiral Riker stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the capital was reduced to rubble. The fight was over, but there was no joy in his victory. He had done what he set out to do, broken the Alliance, shattered their hopes, and proved that humanity was not to be trifled with. The galaxy would now bow to human might, and nothing would stand in their way. Riker knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had been warned, and the message was clear. Humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with, it was the future. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The stars above the galaxy were silent witnesses to the great change that was about to unfold. It had begun with a single message, a signal sent across the stars by humanity, and it had echoed through every corner of the universe. The old ways, the old powers that ruled the galaxy for centuries, were about to fall. Humanity was coming, and nothing in the galaxy could stop it. The galaxy had always been divided factions, empires, and alliances, each with their own interests, desires, and secrets. But the arrival of humanity, with its raw, unyielding strength and determination, was like a storm breaking through the ancient walls of an old fortress. And now, the galaxy would be rewritten. The Alliance, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, stood at the heart of the conflict. They had held dominion over countless worlds, and their fleets were feared across the stars. General Valor, the commander of the Alliance's forces, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the view screen as the human fleet appeared in the distance. The humans had come from nowhere, their ships moving faster and more efficiently than anyone had anticipated. Valor had heard the rumors, of course, the stories of human resilience, their unyielding spirit. But even he hadn't believed it would come to this. Their forces were massive, their technology far beyond what the Alliance had faced before. The time for negotiation was long past. The humans had made their intentions clear. They were here to conquer, and they would not stop until every last power in the galaxy had fallen before them. "Prepare the fleet," Valor ordered, his voice steady, though a hint of unease lingered in his chest. The Alliance had always prided itself on its military might, but now, in the face of humanity's relentless advance, he couldn't help but wonder if it would be enough. "Hold the line at all costs. We cannot allow them to breach our defenses." His officers scrambled to carry out the orders, but deep down, Valor knew that the fight ahead would be unlike anything they had ever faced before. The humans were relentless, their soldiers fearless. And most terrifying of all, they had an ability to adapt, to survive, that the galaxy had never seen before. The older civilizations, the ancient races who had once dominated the stars, had long since been forgotten. They had crumbled under the weight of their own arrogance. But humanity? They had nothing to lose. They were desperate, driven by a force none of the old powers could understand. Meanwhile, on the human flagship, Admiral Drake stood at the helm, staring out at the vastness of the galaxy. He knew the stakes. His fleet was part of a larger campaign to change the very nature of the galaxy itself. The old powers had ruled for too long, and their corruption had seeped into every corner of the universe. The Alliance, with its false promises of peace, had enslaved countless worlds, forcing them to bend to its will. But humanity had never been a part of that system. They had watched from the shadows, biding their time, preparing for the day when they could finally make their move. That day had come. "Admiral, we are ready to begin the assault," a voice interrupted Drake's thoughts. It was Captain Alden, his most trusted officer. "The fleet is in position." Drake nodded, his face expressionless. "Then let's begin. No mercy. No negotiations. We take what is ours." The human fleet surged forward, a tidal wave of power and precision. Their ships were sleek and deadly, armed with weapons that made even the mightiest of Alliance warships seem outdated. The first volley of fire tore through the void, striking the outer defenses of the Alliance's fleet with deadly force. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as the Alliance ships fought back, but their efforts were futile. The humans had planned for every contingency. They knew the weaknesses of their enemies better than the Alliance knew itself. Valor watched helplessly as his ships were torn apart, one after another. The human fleet was everywhere, attacking with a coordinated ferocity that seemed unstoppable. The Alliance had never been prepared for such a force. Their ships, once the pride of their empire, were no match for the sheer power and precision of humanity's assault. Valor gritted his teeth as he watched the destruction unfold before him. There was no room for hesitation now. The time for retreat had passed. The battle raged on for hours, but it became clear to Valor that the outcome was inevitable. The human forces were relentless, pushing forward with no regard for their own losses. They would fight until the very last ship had been destroyed. And as each of the Alliance's ships fell, so too did the morale of the soldiers on the ground. The Alliance's armies, who had once fought bravely on countless worlds, now found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, and outmatched. The humans were everywhere on the ground, in the skies and in space. The Alliance was crumbling. "Sir, we've lost contact with our remaining forces on the surface," one of Valor's officers reported. "The humans have broken through our defenses." "It's over." Valor's face went pale. His mind raced, trying to find a way out, a way to turn the tide. But deep down, he knew the truth. The galaxy was no longer his to command. It belonged to humanity now. On the human flagship, Admiral Drake stood at the helm, watching as the final Alliance stronghold was destroyed. The last remnants of the once powerful empire were vanishing before his eyes. The battle had been hard fought, but the humans had emerged victorious. The galaxy was being rewritten, and humanity was the author. No longer would the old powers hold sway. No longer would the Alliance dictate the fate of the stars. It was humanity's turn to rise. Drake turned to his crew, a rare smile playing across his face. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We have broken the old order. Now we rebuild. A new galaxy, built on the strength of humanity. We will forge a future where no power is left unchecked, where no empire can hold sway over the stars. The galaxy is ours." As the final shots of the battle rang out across the galaxy, Valor and the remaining survivors of the Alliance watched from their crippled ships as humanity's fleet moved on. They were no longer the masters of the galaxy. Humanity had taken its place as the new power. The old ways had crumbled, and with them, the old empires had fallen. The galaxy had been rewritten, and humanity was the author of its new future.